Being a fan of the Dragon Prince has been one of the most experiences of my life. This franchise is a roller coaster of expectations, disappointments, success, failure, and a desperate hope that the series will live up to its own potential, which isn't always easy since the show has been inconsistent as of late. And I have been low-key dreading the return of this show, as I knew it could break me. So let's talk about season 6. Now, context. I got my big break on YouTube talking about the Dragon Prince. Crazy, I know, I used to do non-shipping things. But this series will always hold a special place in my heart, as you never forget the first time the algorithm blesses you. Also, the first part of the Dragon Prince is really solid. Not perfect, it has a lot of the same problems now as it did then, but those things didn't matter as much as the show was fun. It had nuanced characters, three-dimensional villains, Team Rocket, political intrigue that didn't feel like a waste of time, interesting lore, Rayla, hallowed be thy ship.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Actually, the more I think about it, I may have always been a shipping channel, but this show, it was good. The finale was solid. I wanted to see where they would go next, as I was convinced it could only get better, and I was wrong.
What?
Yeah, season 4 was a massive step down in every respect. Did a whole video about it. Go watch if you haven't already. But in a completely non-sarcastic summary of my issues, it's boring. Between seasons 3 and 4, COVID happened. What felt like a lifetime had passed. I needed this story to come out swinging to suck me back in, and what I got instead was every issue the series ever had at its worst. The pacing was atrocious, taking a third of its runtime to build any proper momentum, then shooting that in the back of the head for an info dump, as they just decide they need to reveal the full backstory of a villain whose whole appeal is built around being a mystery. The actual plot was a narrative bog, as the series felt like it was stalling for time to justify keeping Earth in the title. They broke up Rayla in a comic, then proceed to waste that idea that Rayla has been gone for all these years to start slow walking the two getting back together again. This show was pitched as Game of Thrones for the whole family, but it feels like the only part of that they focused on was all the travel. Also, the Sunfire sea plot is terrible, and season 5 isn't that much better.
Meat? Hat.
Like, okay, it is an improvement in every regard, but the bar was in hell. I watched the season with a friend who also didn't fuck with it, so not wanting to just repeat myself, I just decided to not make another video. The only thing new I could really add was that episode 8 was one of the best episodes in the show. Finnegan was a great villain. I had nothing else to add. Low-key, the biggest takeaway I had from season 5 was that the Dragon Prince as a show kinda felt like, rather than maturing, it was more leaning into its younger fan base, which, given how often it ends up in the kids' top 10, that is valid. Maybe I just aged out of it, but then they cut a woman's leg off, so apparently it can still go places I don't expect. Also, I love Hilda. It is one of my favorite shows of all time, so I know I can still love a kid's cartoon. But what the Dragon Prince was going for wasn't hitting anymore, meaning that I basically need season 6 to be good or terrible, so that I can decide whether or not I was gonna drop the series or not, and I'm making this video so clearly something happened. Which, yeah, season 6 is a return to form for the series. Truly, I went into this season scared that I was gonna be bored or frustrated, and what I got instead was a pretty good time, no alcohol required. Suddenly, I'm reinvested in a series I was so afraid of letting go. Does it still have its problems? Yeah, it has tons. Season 6 is able to make the series work, eliminating a lot of the issues that I've had and making me ignore the rest. Which, as a YouTuber, that's one of my highest compliments. Though I will be bringing up the issues in a bit, but first, let's be positive, then negative, then go back and forth. So firstly, in the good things, let's talk about the premiere. Now personally, the idea of watching a Dragon Prince premiere fills me with anxiety and dread, as I'm just so used to having my time wasted and the momentum of the series killed. Yes, the previous ones do tend to set things up, but in a story where there's allegedly a race against the clock, having things reset back to that God-forsaken castle drove me up a wall I have yet to come off of. So imagine my surprise when season 6's actually slaps. We open with Viren being alive, the joy of his reunion with Terry, only for the visceral horror of what Claudia did to sink in. This really set the bar high that this season was gonna be different, and it's honestly shocking how much graphic content is allowed into The Dragon Prince, though I will put a pin in that. But Viren and Claudia's reunion, Viren leaving, the screams, they were all immaculate. This opening is perfect. The rest of it, despite being back at the place that shall not be named, still manages to be good as it keeps the story going, creating the setup for the events of the season rather than just feeling like it's justifying a road not taken. Callum's fear of being used by Erebos is used to justify his borderline reckless plan to go find the Star Saber, which leads to the even bigger godsend of having just Rayla and Callum together. As I don't know what it is, forget the ship, the story is just somehow more focused when it's just these two, and I want an explanation for why. But every scene in the premiere feels purposeful rather than plotting, with the only two things that really kinda rub me the wrong way about it being the justification for Viren abandoning his recently maimed daughter is a little hand-wavy. Like, Viren just got a new lease on life, and he's now betting that abandoning Claudia to take accountability is gonna guide her down a better path instead of being there with her. That just felt weird. The other thing is that Claudia abandoning Terry was so good that them hobbling it back just blew my mind.
But you're never going to leave me.
What?
Because I'm leaving you first.
12 seconds later.
I've made a huge mistake.
Okay, this is my first negative, but Claudia in this season felt weird to me. They start her off in such a dark, fascinating place that the fact that they just have her come back to Terry, who is the pinnacle of emotional support to a incredible degree, like that blew my mind. They can do this, but the raw emotional state Claudia was in after her dad left, that was just begging to be mined for more drama. If we're doing this, I think I'd rather have something like Zuko Alone, where we just see Claudia reflecting then coming back to Terry, rather than just having her decide to come back on her own, sit in silence for moments that are beautiful but do not promote interest. Terry is here just to be the greatest partner who ever lived. Like, this feels like a massive missed opportunity for me for how much Claudia has been built up as going down a dark path. For her to essentially decide to start stalling off screen is kind of annoying to me. The rest of her story this season is essentially we're just twiddling our thumbs until she gets manipulated by Erebos and his tragic backstory, which for how much time we have spent with Claudia, that kind of feels like a disservice that we're just like, okay, great opening, walk it back, wait till the last moment for her to do the thing the villain needs her to. I honestly think that for the last 3 seasons, for how much time we've spent with Claudia, a lot of that time was not well spent. As it feels like rather than her just being on a path to hell, it kind of feels like the story would just slow to a crawl near every off-ramp, so just, hey, maybe you should not keep going forward, only for her to like keep going to the next exit, rinse and repeat till basically this. I still like Claudia as a character, but I think the story has been criminally underutilizing her, which is a shame since she's been set up to be one of the more interesting characters in the story. But speaking of interesting, let's go to the 2 parts of the show that never disappoints: Soren and Viren.
I'm so proud of you. What are you trying to do? Soren, I'm just... No! Stop it! Just stop it!
Now I'm putting these together as this season you can't talk about one without bringing up the other, but to give backstory, Soren has been the MVP of this series. He's the one character that I think manages to embody this show's silliness and kiddish moments with its darker and more intense ones. Everyone else, there's a bit of whiplash, but Soren's charisma and his goofiness manages to make them flow just semi-seamlessly. Meanwhile, Viren is the most interesting character in the show by far. Going from a villain you you understand, to a confused and penitent man ready to start a new chapter in his life after ruining everyone else's. While I think that Viren's death is a little abrupt, and I kinda wish we got to see him explore more of his issues with other people, right now Soren's the only one he's focused on, which that does make sense on an emotional level, especially since Soren has never really had a chance to talk with his dad, mainly because we straight up skipped the one chance that we had. Yeah, this did annoy me, not gonna lie, but they also make up for it by their interactions here. Viren has turned himself in. Soren, fresh off of being goofy and shipped with Corvus, is slapped in the face with the fact that his dad is back in his life, meaning that they finally talk in this pained and confused situation, where Soren doesn't really know what he wants to get out of this, but he's here, and you really get the sense that Soren is being both the man who's outgrown and cut his dad out of his life, and the son who still yearns to see his dad even when it might not be the most healthy choice. Meanwhile, Viren isn't really here for redemption. He's more here to do damage control for his own actions. He knows that he messed up, that him redeeming himself wouldn't mean anything as the mental scars he left on his kids is still very much fresh. So we get a short but emotional arc of Viren looking back on his life, his fall from grace, how he destroyed his marriage in a desperate attempt to save his son, and how he has just kept repeating that pattern his entire life. And not to mention that he resents Soren for being the reason that things went the way that they did. But Viren processes all this, decides not to tell his son as he realizes that maybe this extra context just would be another burden rather than being a freeing thing. Viren may have been a vegetable all last season, but I think his arc here really brings home just how Viren is leagues more interesting than basically every other character in this show. I like Rayla and Callum. They don't have these layers of complexity that makes them engaging to me from a writing standpoint. Viren, for as much of a monster he's been, paradoxically feels like the most human person here, as his flaws and failings create a character that you just love to sit back and watch and think about, which in turn makes his kids more interesting as their relationship is now multifaceted in a way that actually can have multiple outcomes. Yes, Rayla abandoned Callum in a comic. He's mad, but happy she's here. But at no point do you ever think that they're not going to get back together. Viren's story has been building over the course of the entire series, and I think his ending, while brief and a bit abrupt, is very satisfying. He gives his life to protect his son and the people he's always wanted to protect, but actually had been endangering more often than not. With his kids, of course, getting to have multiple interpretations of his actions, which guides how they'll act in the future, which I think is a sign of a really good character. One whose journey managed to be compelling even when it wasn't being given the best material to work with. R.I.P. Viren, and R.I.P. to Soren's therapist, as unpacking all of this is going to be a nightmare. Now to move on to something that isn't complex in the slightest, let's talk about how the show has been handling Ezran.
We can solve this without any violence.
She broke a record, which is what you sound like, a broken record.
Now this is basically two negatives wrapped up into one, so let's start with my first opinion. Ezran doesn't feel like a character anymore. He has been criminally underutilized for the last 3 seasons. He's basically written out the story at every inconvenience, be it meeting the dragons, having meetings at the kingdom, then when he is there, he is kinda just there. I honestly can't think of a single arc Ezran has had in this entire part, which could be fine, not every character needs one, but I think for Ezran, this puts him in a bad situation for my personal tastes, as outside of one cold line to Viren, it feels like the only thing that the story has for Ezran to do anymore is to preach at us about doing the morally right thing. Ezran's being written right now to a point where he can't open his mouth without the story trying to hand him a Nobel Peace Prize, which I just find tedious. If Viren is the mess that makes you like to guess and pick apart his motivations, Ezran is the moral compass that'll always choose the paragon option. He'll always suggest caution, peace, love, and all those other morally right things that sound correct, but make for an uninteresting character. As simply put, he's right. The story always frames Ezran as being in the right or reasonable. He's never put in a position where his morals are truly challenged, and when an idea is presented, he's just put up against people that always clearly suck, so we never have to listen to the other side of the argument. And what drives me a little bit off the wall about all this, as I did love Ezran in the initial 3 seasons, and this was a problem then, but it is really apparent here, is that it feels like he's essentially being used to lecture the audience on what's right and wrong, which got old real quick. I think one of my biggest personal turnoffs for this show is that a lot of episodes will often feel like they are designed to impart a certain message, but delivering the message to the audience rather than the excuse of telling it to the actual characters in the show. Which, yes, the show is aimed at a younger audience, but so long as they've got family in the title, it's technically fair game. And while I may not be the whippersnapper that I once was, I still remember rolling my eyes anytime a show tried to lecture me this much without trying to at least semi-hide it behind the characters. The Dragon Prince does a lot of good things, but subtle in its messaging it is not, which does work in a lot of respects. Trans flowers and hair are so on the nose that they go back around to being cute, but most of its lessons feel like they are too many and too often and take the place of what could be actual character moments. Like, did we really need to spend time with Amaya apologizing to Rayla for attacking her in season 1? Does the story need to stop, take a knee, call her champ, and tell Claudia she needs to slow down and take a breath for an entire season? Does Rayla need to phrase Callum using dark magic for the second time in his life, like he's facing an addiction? I'm not being anti-lessons, but I also think that the way the characters talk just when it's time to present them, it does change a little bit. With some characters, this can work, but in others, it's a little noticeable when their diction suddenly takes a massive jump up. This all comes back to Ezran, as when he's getting set up as just the arbiter of morality, he doesn't get a lot of chances to be fun as we basically know what he's gonna say at all times. I'm hoping and pretty sure they're gonna give him something great now that Catalyst has been flattened. Maybe the kid will get a little angry. Maybe we'll let him actually do something. As right now, I'm kinda sad that Rayla and Callum are consistently more interesting on their own than whenever they are with him. That doesn't feel right to me, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Okay, let's talk about Rayla. If enough people watch this video, I might do a Raylan video. But to get my gushing out of the way here, they screwed this couple over. Like truly, breaking them up in a comic was a rough decision, as normies coming into the season were taken out of the loop, with it being made worse to me in this season, as Rayla's story and where it goes doesn't hit quite the same if you don't have the context of how she went into this lake before and was attacked by the tortured spirits of her loved ones, making her freeing them all the more impactful. But if you don't know the comic, this is kind of just fine. You don't realize this is a full circle moment, and her being gone ends up amounting to she got a new pet and the story is dragging its feet to getting this couple back together. It was a choice and it didn't feel like it was really worth it. So the fact that these two are basically on their own for this entire season was great to me, as I think the weird benefit of having Rayla and Callum together is that it allows the show to slip into being a fun adventure show. The politics that have kind of bogged down the series as of late just don't have time to become annoying, so we are just allowed to indulge in the characters bouncing off each other and having their own little romance. They met on a frozen ship. That was hilarious. And the fact that they got back together has been something that people have been waiting for a long time. And while a little corny that Callum's one truth, his star in the very center of his being, is her, I think it's sweet. The fact that he did this whole side quest to get the Quasar diamonds for her family was a cute reveal that did a lot to show how well Callum knows Rayla, as he knows that she would jump through so many hoops to help others, but would never slow down to help herself. While I don't love the time shenanigans episode, I like this side plot of the two of them visiting a new culture of elves, helping them out and progressing the story along the way while tackling their own personal issues. Callum's fear of dark magic and Erebos, that's been dealt with. They did get tricked by the twink, but they managed to remove the ability to possess Callum, so hey, that is gonna come in clutch later. This season gave the people what they wanted, and we can just move past the comic that didn't add much. Rayla and Callum are their best when they're together, so this is a very welcome change. Enough said. Now, moving on to something that I'm gonna be a little bit more petty about, as I have a bone to pick with how the show handles its lore.
What happened to your beloved mate who disappeared?
Is that going to be on the test?
This is again something that annoys me personally, but I just think that this show can be a little weird about how it reveals information about its world and characters. Sometimes they'll have incredible nuance and leave the door open for us to have our own conclusions about the societies we visit, while other times it'll spoon feed us info and it'll become borderline comedy. But that's actually not the part I want to talk about. I'm more here just to bring up how this season has this weird habit of just answering questions that no one asks. Erebos, unprompted and without missing a beat, brings up Sol Righam's long-lost mate, and it makes you question if that was something that was ever brought up, as it is like, here, it is dropped so casually that I feel like I was supposed to have already known this. Or Rayla knowing the story of the ice pet and we just transitioned to a full flashback that I don't remember being foreshadowed. It's so abrupt that rather than deepening the lore of the world, it makes me question the way the show is delivering information. I think this also extends some of the call forwards to the show keeps doing to the Orphan Queen, which for those who don't know, one of the future series Wonderstorm wants to do for the Dragon Prince is a prequel about Ezran's ancestor who initially imprisoned Erebos. Which cool, great, would love to see it, but every time the story shouts out these prequel characters, it always feels just a little bit off, as I know what happened isn't going to be fully explained in this series, as it's being saved for its own. So paying attention to the extended material has kind of made me less invested in the main, which is a little fucked up when you think about it. Probably me, Prom. It is what it is. On the bright side, I only have positive things left to say, except that's a lie. The Sunfire plot is still here.
You are terrible.
The Sunfire plotline is asinine to me. In season 4, it was a disconnected mess with decent ideas that felt like it would be better served in extended material and not crammed into a season that desperately needed momentum, but instead we're constantly cutting back to this. I hated it. Got a little bit, but not much better in season 5, and after seeing where it all led to, yeah, I still stand by my initial assessment. And I'm just gonna keep this one brief. The Sunfire storyline is weak to me for a number of reasons. Firstly, it trades heavily in the same predictable soapbox speeches that this show already isn't great at. Kareem is an unserious twat reactionary. You can sum up his entire character as just make the elves great again. Or just more damning, Viren, but worse. As though Viren has nuance to how he's written, Kareem is basically just screeching about tradition without us ever really getting immersed in said culture. Like after season 4, we don't really learn that much new information about the Sunfire elves versus just seeing a bunch of their stuff and their library. And that has the effect of making it so that he's not arguing for anything, he's just arguing against Janai, which mirrors real-world traditionalists, but, and here's the thing, that doesn't make it entertaining or feel like it's worth my time. So the fact that it all boils down to another speech and Erebos tricking Sol Regum into attacking Katalis, yeah, as just this is what it all led to, I feel like we could have done it in less time easily. And if we're just going for the theme about choosing love and building a better future over holding on to the past, yeah, I hope the kids who watch this do get something out of it, but this is something I have heard a lot, and it is getting away with the story that I actually like, so I end up hating it as a result. Yes, some of the ideas are interesting, but I feel like every semi-notable thing that's said was already said in part 1, where Viren was basically doing the exact same thing. Trading in xenophobia, preaching about how they need to kill the outsiders, within the intrigue of like, okay, well, how are they gonna build a better future, boiling down to a speech saying, we're gonna build a better future, and that's going, okay, and? Ezran talks, oh my god, there's families, they are building in communities, there are friendships. I'm like, where? Are they in the room with us? The only thing we really got was Amaya and Janai's wedding, which was cute, but it's the only thing that we have. And all this together just doesn't feel like it was actually worth the amount of time we spent with it. Also, Janai has the worst example of artificially creating filler I've ever seen.
As Queen of the Sunfire Elves, I forbid you.
2 very boring minutes later.
I may be queen, but even I don't have the power to stop those two once they've set their mind to something.
So that was a fucking lie.
Can we at least pretend we're not padding out the story? But moving on to the last good thing. The finale is probably the biggest shit just got real moment in this show's history. The castle has been destroyed, Soren's face got mashed, Viren straight up sacrificed himself by using his own heart as a spell component. It is honestly crazy just how graphic the show is able to go at times, and I do enjoy that. Even if I do think that overall the atmosphere of The Dragon Prince makes it so it keeps it from being ever shocking or truly dark to me. Where it's like, okay, bad things are happening, there is blood, but I still feel so safe and secure, so it doesn't stand out to me as much as something smaller in another show. Like the worst moment of this for me, and just my personal distance between what the story did and my reaction to it, was probably Claudia losing her leg, which is surprising. Like a teen just lost her leg in a show for all ages, but my honest reaction was that Claudia didn't lose a leg, the show gained representation. Yeah, that's how safe I feel when I witness something that's supposed to be shocking. Again, the ending for this season was absolutely insane. It shatters the status quo of the series to a point where I'm excited to see where they'll take the story, as they can't just walk over this. They can't just return to the castle and reset. That thing is gone. Erebos is free and gigantic. He's got Claudia in the palm of his hand, and it turns out the opening was to scale. This man is ready to destroy the world for what happened to his daughter, and I am ready to see what happens next. As everyone is gonna have to deal with this man, the Star Saber is probably about to make a comeback, or Ezran is gonna have to grapple with the loss of his kingdom versus his better impulses to talk no jutsu his way out of this one. I am hyped. I think the actual finale episode did hit the brakes just a little bit with too much exposition, but I'm still very excited to see what happens next. If this show can keep this momentum going, if it can like get darker, or if it's gonna backpedal, or just see how fun it can be. I really enjoyed this season. I'm not fully certain that the last 2 seasons really was worth the amount of time we spent to get here. If like you boil down the last 2 into just one, I think this would honestly be perfect. We still have 1 whole season left, and then possibly more down the road, as this is only part 2 of a multi-part plan. I'm curious to see what will happen, but that's gonna be it for me. Let me know what you all thought down below. Should I make that Rayla video? Like and subscribe, sway my decision, and maybe one day I'll bring back the sarcastic summaries. Peace out, love you all.